Peace, greetings, salutations. Hoping that you all are very, very well. I said this the last bunch of times. It's been a minute. Life has been a lot. I am, um, but mourning one of my closest friends, and I want to actually dedicate this particular episode to Lutricia White, aka Miss Trish, my Shiro. One of my work besties for the last decade of my life. We love you. We appreciate you. We will forever miss and remember you and cherish you. Um, so yeah, um, and per usual. Again, welcome y'all. The Paper Plane is a podcast created and hosted by myself, Colin Masashi Ehara, where I interview people I am so blessed and honored to share community with, asking them about a book or books that have had a transformative impact on their lives. And in a society where literacy rates are steadily declining and a growing number of podcasts hosted specifically by cishet men consciously or unconsciously champion expressions of masculinity that come at the expense of women, femmes, LGBTQIA, Two-Spirit Plus, and especially BIPOC folks, this space imperfectly aims to operate as a counter narrative to those funny ass things. The Paper Plane is a space that intends to highlight the dire importance of relationships, of community, of dialogue, perpetual learning, honest expression as art, art as honest expression, freedom for literacy, and of course, literacy for freedom. It speaks to planes of existence attached to the act of reading, but also as a metaphor for the quote unquote flights we take as we sit in what Ta-Nehisi Coates calls a one-way interface as readers and how these journeys shape us. Y'all, today's guest is my A1, Day One, Bro Montana comrade, fellow Warriors, Niners, Giants fan, son of the sucker-free city, Frisco, stand up, and one of my closest friends of the last 25 plus years, Josh Bloom. We met at UC Santa Cruz as freshmen at the turn of the millennia, and I knew immediately when seeing his Winamp playlist on his desktop PC when we met in the Stephen Biko dorms via a friend. Shout out Pauline, or we love you, that we would be friends. Joshua Bloom's professional career began in the nonprofit sector as a community organizer and advocate for young people. He spent much of his time in the Bay Area learning the concept of winning culture as well as the foundational principles for building community and developing quality relationships. In 2026, his work revolves mostly around architecting the careers and the campaigns of musical artists. He does this by providing high-level oversight and management as well as developing and executing creative marketing strategies. He's had success with some of the most talented and impactful artists in music, including but not limited to Little Simz, Lucky Daye, Freddie Gibbs Madlib, Jenevieve, Tkay Maidza, and 320. And it is with that I am very, very honored, very, very excited to welcome Josh Bloom onto the Paper Plane. My brother, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today?
Oh man, I'm great, brother. Thanks for that incredible intro, which I have no idea what you just said, but I'm sure it was phenomenal. Unless you were just talking shit about
Off
me.
top, off top. I mean, both of them, always. But yeah,
Um,
I'm so happy to get to spend some time with you, talk about this text that has been important to international bestseller. But very very curious to kind of hear the specific ways that it's impacted you, your work, and also how that's grown over time. So I just want to thank you again so much for being here. Um, and I'm gonna jump into just giving a brief introduction of the book we'll be discussing today. And so today we'll be talking about The Tipping Point, How Little Things Can Make a Big Difference, which was the debut book by Malcolm Gladwell. It was first published by Little Brown in 2000. This was the year that we met, which is funny. And Gladwell defines a tipping point as the moment of critical mass, the threshold, the boiling point. And the book seeks to explain and describe the mysterious sociological changes that mark everyday life. As Gladwell states, ideas and products and messages and behaviors spread like viruses do. The examples of such changes in his book include the rise in popularity and sales of hush puppy shoes in the mid 1990s and a steep drop in New York City's crime rate after 1990. So, y'all, please note spoilers will abound. And also, these are some of the things, the following themes that we'll be discussing as it pertains to this particular work. The first is the law of the few and music gatekeepers. The second, the stickiness factor in music marketing. Number three, the power of context and industry shifts. Four, social epidemics and diversity in music. Five, the broken windows theory and industry culture. Number six, tipping points and the role of advocacy. And seven, predicting the next tipping point in music. And so for the opening question, Josh, I am just curious, this is pretty wide open, but what made you decide upon the tipping point for us to discuss today? And what journeys would you say this text is taking you on?
Man, first of all, I can't believe we met in 2000. I didn't even put that together.
I know it's
It
wild.
totally makes sense. But sometimes when you hear it out loud, you're like, damn, we old as shit. That's
Hmm.
crazy. Um, but nah, man, Tipping Point is just one of those classics, man. You know, it reminds me, what comes to mind is I was rewatching The Sopranos recently, which is to me the GOAT show of that type of show.
Hmm.
And I've probably rewatched Sopranos like maybe I'm not gonna embarrassingly, it's an embarrassing amount of times that I watched
Hmm.
that show all the way through. But I was watching this one season where AJ and his girl were out in the woods in his ridiculous yellow SUV, and they're listening to Bob Dylan, and I think it was "It's All Right, Ma, I'm Only Bleeding" they were listening to. Bob Dylan, of course, one of the best lyricists, arguably the best, if not one of the best lyricists. Um, Maybe him and Vast Air, maybe a comparison between him and no, I'm just kidding.
I was
Um,
like, where is he going with this?
let me land the plane, man. Let me
That's
land the
air.
plane. Nah, man. But they were listening to Bob Dylan, and they were just, it's like they're young and they're becoming politicized, and they're very sheltered kids, and they're just listening to a song that was created probably in the '60s, and they're like, man, it's crazy how everything that he's talking about applies to today, which I think that episode must have been somewhere in the '90s or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
30 years or whatever it is, and they're just blown away by it, and then of course their car blows up, and it's like this whole metaphorical thing. But but no, it's that's very much what the tipping point is for me. It's been like 26 years since Malcolm Gladwell put that book out, and I mean, it applies, I think, to a lot of people's lives, whether you're a music marketer, you work in the music business like I do, whether it's in a movement building, if you're an organizer, like there's all these ways to look at culture, cultural moments, and also this idea of technology, which I'm sure we'll talk about, which has played a huge role in creating tipping points, but it's just one of those evergreen pieces of work that will continue to always apply today, man. And yeah, that's why I chose it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think this is a nice segue into kind of thinking about this next piece that I have some curiosity around some of your experience and thoughts. And that's around, this law of the few and music gatekeepers. And so Gladwell argues that trends take off because of what he says are connectors, mavens, and salesmen. And so in today's music industry, who do you see maybe playing some of these roles? Are A&R executives still tastemakers, or have like influencers, playlist curators, social media changed the game completely? Some of both. Any thoughts on that piece?
Oh yeah, lots of thoughts on it, man. I think it's changed a lot over time. Um, I think it's important to think about the history, and I'm not going to be too long-winded about this in the music business, but I mean, we come from an era, you said we just met in 2000. We're at an era, that's like the Napster era, it's like
Yeah.
that, and we were like, oh, the industry's changing, music is changing, and the way we consume music, but people are still listening to CDs, they're burning CDs now, but they're listening to them, and people are still buying CDs and tapes, and maybe not tapes actually,
Mm.
and physicals in that regard. And obviously there's a lot of different ways in which people participate in culture and music, but if you fast forward a little bit to kind of who the gatekeepers used to be, because back then it was like maybe radio and
Yeah.
labels had a lot of power. industry position mattered. If you got signed or you were with this association or that association or
Hmm.
your record hit the charts or whatever it is, like that's really what it was. But then we hit after kind of the piracy era, we started to get into the blog era, which I'd say was probably around 2007 to
Yep.
2014 is where I put that. And the blog era was interesting because you had these connectors, people who ran blogs like your Two Dope Boys and Now Rights and
Sure.
people like that, and even some friends of ours who are part of that culture and that scene who are incredibly influential. And like you getting on a blog, man, I remember I was working with Simz and when she got on Two Dope Boys, we were like jumping for joy. Like it was that
Yeah.
kind of era. I think it was like 2013,
Yep.
2014, so the end of it. But it's like this is before Spotify started and it's like you get those cosigns and it matters incredibly,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
even then, your mavens are still the people who are whether it's like important DJs or
Mhm.
curators or but mostly musicians and respected musicians, which I think is still very much a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, then you move into the streaming era, 2014, and everything changes yet again.
Hmm.
And and now the people who are your gatekeepers become playlist editors, and
Hmm.
streaming companies, and Beats turns into Apple Music, and Spotify becomes Spotify, and then everything else becomes that. But SoundCloud is somewhere in between that era.
Yep.
There's all these different gatekeepers now through the streaming era, and this is where we see a really big disproportionate um, you know, issue with royalties and
Yeah.
the whole business side of things really changes and everyone's scrambling to figure that part out. And seemingly before you know it, we're in the digital era. It's like it's
Hmm.
in 2021, that I would say that was the tipping point for digital into streaming into digital. And the funny part about this is all these things still exist. Like this, we're still in the streaming era technically,
Yeah.
but as a catalyst for what makes a record go or what really moves the needle, like it used to be enough to just have great music and great artists and good connections. And even before that, it was just like get your record plugged by radio and like
Hmm.
payola and all these things. And now payola is completely different. So the digital era now changes that, and the single biggest tipping point is now TikTok. So there's
Wow.
all
Yep.
these different eras which we've gone through, where I think the connectors, the mavens, and the salespeople change in some ways dramatically and in some ways only slightly. Like I think mavens are kind of mavens. Personally, that's the way I look at it. Like Tyler, the Creator, is someone I look at as a maven. I think he's
Hmm.
someone who,
Okay.
even because he was around during the blog era,
Yeah.
and he could do something as simple as going on Twitter and say, Frank Ocean's amazing, and now everybody cares about Frank Ocean, right? Like
Hmm.
that era doesn't exist anymore. But now Tyler has his own festival, and if he puts you on Flog
Hmm.
that's a thing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
or if he posts you on his story, like it maybe isn't as big as a thing as it used to be, but it's a thing. If SZA posts you, that's a thing. If
Yep.
there's like so there's definitely and of course if you have more reach, I think that your Taylor Swifts of the world, like those are your salespeople, those are the
Hmm.
people who are much bigger and have more reach and not that Tyler isn't, he is, but in some ways you can occupy all three, and some people are more one, two, or three of those.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. And I think like, going off of that, all right, so Gladwell, emphasizes that for an idea to spread, right, and you started to kind of name or, allude to a lot of these things, but that he says it has to quote unquote stick, right? And so I'm curious kind of what makes an artist, a song, cultural movement truly sticky, like in this day and age. How do A&R teams and labels identify that potential? And I even actually have an example from last year that I'm kind of thinking about, but any initial thoughts on that?
Well, number one, A&R teams ain't doing shit anymore. So you can dead that.
Okay. Say more about that. What do you mean?
I say that as a generalization, but I think, and we'll probably talk about this more when we get into where the industry is going, but I think the idea that a label is bringing, I think a label can help amplify for sure. I don't want to sit here and say that a major label, and typical A&R, because A&R is more about the music. A&R is more about putting the songs together, right?
Okay.
And there is, in my opinion, I think one thing that hasn't changed in music is, and I'll say this, this is just something I say. I don't know if I came up with it. I think I did. But a hit ain't really a hit anymore, but a hit is still a hit. Like a hit ain't a hit anymore, but a hit is still a hit. And so I think like from a stickiness standpoint, because of TikTok and because of what the digital age has spawned, with how records connect to audiences, um, your song doesn't always have to be a hit for it to go viral and for it to stick. In other words, your content strategy can be so good, and a 8-second part of your song can be so sticky that that song might not even be a hit. An example of that is like Surround Sound by Jid featuring 21 Savage and Young
Mm,
Baby Tate, right? A record
okay.
that, yeah, it has like a culturally recognizable sample with Miss Fat Booty by Mos
Yeah.
Def, but like only people like you and I know about that. Like
Yeah.
the kids don't really know that. I
They don't
mean,
know about Ayatollah?
yeah. What y'all know about Inspector Deck?
Hmm.
But nah, they don't really know. But this trend pops off online with a record that I don't think is like a hit. Like I wouldn't call tw Surround Sound a hit. I
Mm.
don't think anyone thought it was. I thought they probably thought it was like a cool record that had 21 Savage and Tate on it. Like it just thought
Sure.
it was going to be some fly shit, and it just took off. And now that song has almost 1 billion streams on Spotify alone.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, but because of some crazy trend that went off on TikTok. So
I
like,
see.
but I would say that's the exception to the rule. That's more of an anomaly. I think that most records that are really going, like you look at a Die with a Smile or like, Olivia Dean and what's happening with her,
Sure.
Sabrina Carpenter, um, those are still hit records.
Yeah.
So Sabrina Carpenter had been putting out music for years before it really, really, really took off. And
Mm.
what happened? She got with Julian Bonetta and Jack Antonoff, like bona fide hit makers, and started making hits. And
Mm.
if you listen to those songs, they're structurally hit records. And so I think the stickiness part of it, it's again, and I think the issue with the business in general, you'll hear me say this a lot, is that we talk about this a lot. See, like Western civilization, Western culture, we think in binary. We don't think holistically,
Mhm.
right? And so
Sure.
when all of a sudden people see the potential of a record going viral on TikTok, which in my opinion is a short-term solution and not a strategy,
Mm.
they start to think, well, it's just about content, right?
Mm.
Because content is so important and content is what's connecting to people. They think, well, let's just only invest in that. It's like, no, like
Mm.
when I say the A&R is dead, I say it because um, the art of it has changed, right? And
Mm.
what's the catalyst for a good song going isn't, in some people's opinion, I think in the best people in the business, it still is the opinion that you still need to have a great record. I
Mhm.
believe I believe that, and I believe the people who are winning actually believe that. But a lot of people who control money in the business are diverting it elsewhere, um, i.e., content strategy, digital marketing, and like it's not binary. You can't have one without the other. Like you need the record. So to say that A&R is, but so when I say for A&R's role in the stickiness part of it, it should be more of a thing. And like the record still matters, but it's also about content, right? It's also about like what am I seeing that's connecting and that's going to stop me from scrolling in 2026,
Hmm.
right? So an A&R doesn't necessarily do that.
Yeah.
It's really more about your artist. It's about their branding. It's about their visual identity.
Yeah.
It is about the record, it is about the lyrics, it is about the hooks, it is about all the things that it's always been. But is it memorable? Is it recognizable? Does it stand out? Is it unique? Does it make me stop and look? Because there's an ocean of content out there right now, and it's incredibly hard to get noticed.
Sure. Man, thank you so much for this breakdown. It's fascinating. To me as somebody who's, completely outside of all of this, but is, has been a lifelong, appreciator of music um and I think, what's coming to mind at the moment is like thinking about, I'm like, I'm right about this. I think it was a year ago, last summer, when, the Kendrick Drake thing is happening, Not Like Us comes out. Right. And
Mm,
like to me, it felt like this really pivotal kind of moment in time, right? That still kind of has echoes, like, but like in your mind, like when, maybe specifically with like Not Like Us, I'm curious, like, from your purview and with like your expertise, like what do you feel like made that particular song like sticky in the summer of like, a year ago?
I gotta be careful, man. The OV hoes is listening to me, man. I don't know. I'm just playing. Nah. I
We already
mean,
had That's the Air Catch a Stray.
I can't not, man. You know what it is. Um, Listen, man, I think that's not like us. Um, it's almost like unfair to talk about that record, right? Because it's like such a it's such a phenomenon. And
Mm,
it was like Kendrick also, who is a massive artist
mm,
who has hits, don't let Drake fool you, has many, many hit records and also cares about song structure. Like Kendrick will do the weirdest, wildest shit and create records that are completely left, right, and center, and then he'll just hit you over the head with a Imagine Dragons feature, and it's
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and he can do it all. But that particular moment was about culture, that wasn't about digital marketing, even though Drake's team would have you believe it probably
Mm,
was. But and
yeah.
I'm sure that there was definitely money spent on digital. I'm not saying there wasn't, but I'm just saying
Hmm.
like this idea that this was culture. Like you can't
Yeah.
you can't fake influence. And I think there's also a large group of people who are tired of fake shit,
Mm,
and I think that's a real thing happening at large in music as as we venture into AI and manufactured moments and people really yearning for something that makes them feel something again. And I
mm,
mean, my overarching theory about it is that Drake is a big like he's a large influence over the way we've been consuming and making music for a long time.
hmm.
Um, and I'll leave that kind of where it is. But I think Kendrick came in and kind of shined the light on what was already happening, which is like um, inauthenticity,
Hmm. Hmm.
and then followed it up with a bop. Like that record's a
Yeah.
bop,
Yeah, it
and
is.
it's incredibly sticky, it's incredibly repeatable, and the power of context. We'll get into that, right? But context is key, right moment, right time, right city, right era,
Mm,
um, right social moment. It's what people and it's just the way he set that record up, it couldn't not be a hit,
mm.
you know? So yeah, and people love negativity, like beef. Like, you know what I mean? It's like beef is what you know what I
The
mean. Like it's what people care about.
the
So
the Petty Hardaway was strong.
you feel me?
Well, you're already starting to move towards this, right? But Gladwell highlights, right, how small changes in environment can trigger these major shifts. And so I'm wondering, in your mind, how has the context of music discovery changed with, streaming, TikTok, AI? Are we at a tipping point where traditional artist development just looks different than anything we've ever seen?
Yeah, man, we're in the eye of the storm right now, brother. I tell you
Mm,
right now, like this is the hardest time in the music business that I've ever seen. I think
okay.
anyone who tells you they have the answers right now is full of shit. Um, and I think there's incredible opportunity and some really beautiful things happening. And I also think that it's really challenging for artists to adjust to what is happening right now. And
Mm, mm.
you mentioned a mouthful with streaming, digital, AI, all that stuff, and TikTok still remains the biggest tipping point.
Okay.
And it's important to understand, the whole idea behind the tipping point. If you read, it's not just about the tipping point. It's everything leading up to the tipping point, right? It's every one of these factors. And TikTok, I think the number is 86%, 84 or 86% of every song on the Hot 100 broke on TikTok.
No way. Wow.
I need to say that again. 80,
Yeah.
84 or
Yeah, please.
86% of every song on the Hot 100 broke on TikTok. So like that is the tipping point, and there are also things like, Instagram is really big for your community. Instagram Reels is really big.
Mm,
YouTube Shorts is starting to really, but I think those are the three main things, and TikTok is so far ahead of being the catalyst. So it ends up kind of one point or another, it's gonna be TikTok, you know?
Mm.
Um, and so the idea of artist development, I think it's really tough if you're an artist. And it depends on what type of artist you are,
Mm.
also. If you were to name artists or give me examples, I could tell you, what I think, what lens applies to them. But I think like if you're an artist who, let's just say you're an artist who rose to prominence in the streaming era. This is my favorite
Okay.
example. Like,
Okay.
and I won't say any names, but there's definitely like artists who rose to prominence in the streaming era. There's a lot of them, right? For between 2014 to 2021, at some point became who they were, started making money, had notoriety,
Mm.
not even the biggest artist in the world, just had a
Sure.
like were legitimate and had a career,
Hmm.
can tour, all these things. And then TikTok happens, and do you start to second guess yourself as an artist in
Mm.
terms of your content strategy and what you're doing, right? Because what you're seeing is working, and what has worked for you isn't working at the same level that it was, right?
Huh.
Getting on a playlist, with the exception of a handful, I could probably count on maybe two hands, probably one hand, doesn't really move the needle anymore. It used to be like you got on Spotify New Music Friday, oh, it's a big deal. And now it's just
Yeah.
not even a big deal anymore. Like,
Wow.
so, what do you do if you're an artist who rose to prominence then? Maybe you're a little bit older, maybe you're 30, maybe you're 34, 35,
Hmm.
and you're putting out an album, and the algorithm has completely swallowed you whole, and nobody is in the comments, and nobody's liking it, and no one's
Wow.
sharing it, right? And you're like, how do you not tie that to your self-worth?
Yeah.
Right?
Dang.
And if you're a team, if you're a manager who your manager, your artists are like this, how do you not tie that to your self-worth? How does that not transfer to you? And how do you as a manager help keep an artist motivated and clear-headed and supported? Um, I think it's a really, really tough time for artists like that. I think it's tough for every artist, but specifically that group,
Yeah.
that is like kind of like, wait, what just happened?
Yeah. Like
Like,
the rug pulled out from underneath you.
yeah, for sure. And then there are some artists where it becomes natural because there's also this, I think there's a little bit of false pattern recognition with what TikTok and what the algorithm is saying, and how could it not be, right? It's like, you fall into an algorithm, and it feels like everything is telling you that what you're doing isn't working, right? In reality, it is working, maybe
Hmm.
maybe invisibly, right? Um, but if you're an artist who understands yourself, your visual brand, your identity, and that also is translating on TikTok, that's a win-win, you know.
Mm. Hmm.
But a lot of artists, it's not that simple. They
Mm.
struggle with putting themselves out there in ways, or figuring out a way to connect authentically on a platform like that, or doing something that feels disruptive. Artists just want it to be about the music. They're just like, here's my
Yeah.
art,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, it's just not about that anymore.
Mm. Mm. I appreciate that breakdown. Um, it's uh, for folks that don't know, they're listening. One of the initial things besides music that Josh and I immediately kind of connected on was thinking about things like racial, socioeconomic justice, student organizing, activism, that kind of thing. And so, Josh, I know that for literal decades, you've been involved in kind of social justice spaces, and so this next question is really kind of around thinking about some of the ideas in the tipping point, and also, as someone, who's done social justice-based community organizing, kind of wanting to hear some of your thoughts on this. And so in the tipping point, ideas spread like epidemics. And as Gladwell says, and so I'm wondering from your perspective as someone who's done both social justice-based community organizing as well as been in, boardrooms where, maybe big money or contracts or things like this are being discussed, and it's like really this kind of business perspective. How can we work to ensure efforts towards equity in the music business don't become short-lived, quote unquote viral moments, but instead, reach their own tipping points toward lasting change? Or do you feel like that's possible in this moment? Not sure.
Yeah, when you say equity in the music business, do you mean more about, on the business side? What, like, whether we're talking about fair contracts, whether we're talking about an artist's stake in their career and this and that. Because when I hear viral moments and, I think more about, you know, yeah, I think I guess I'm a little bit confused.
Yeah, no, no, no. I was that was kind of where I was going. So, thinking about like a lot of what you're kind of naming earlier was this trend away from kind of like the artist being censored, them being able to, like benefit monetarily from, whether it's their streams or these kinds of things.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm wondering kind of like what do you feel like are good pathways towards yeah, fighting for your artists, right? And how have you seen kind of that battleground, for lack of better terminology, kind of play out in your career?
This business was founded by gangsters, I don't want to sound like a negative person,
Mhm.
I think this idea of, equity with artists is about leverage.
Mm,
It is and always has been about that. I think when Nipsey did his licensing deal with Atlantic Records
mm,
and was, bragging about the deal he had and how he owned his masters and how he
yeah.
still got an advance and this and that. It's like, yeah, like cool, but also Nipsey put that work in and built the audience I think it's tough when you think about equity ownership conversations like that because it I've now worked on and work still on all sides of the business. I manage artists, right? So I'm an
Hmm.
artist manager and I do a lot more than that as a manager because it's
Sure.
2026, and so I do it all
Yeah.
from A&R to marketing to creative to everything, you name it. And then I also have worked and still do work on the label side. I'm the head of marketing at a JV label with a
Hmm.
major label, and have done that. As my second time doing that as well. So I do a lot, and I've seen every type of contract there is. I work with some of the best lawyers in the game, and I have all types of opinions about so many facets of the business. And I think like, just for the sake of this conversation, let's just break it down into a couple buckets here, which is there's the indie deal and then there's the major label deal, right?
Okay.
And if you're doing, and this is just one side of the business, we're not going to get into publishing or, sync and licensing or brand, any of this stuff, but like,
Mm,
but the label side, right? And the idea of, fairness or whatever it is, um, and again, bringing it back to what I was talking about with Nipsey, right? He got a great deal, and I never looked at his deal, so maybe it was a terrible deal, but I'm pretty sure it was a great deal. But he got a great deal based off of leverage, and it's really that's your currency, I think, in this business right now, where if you're able to do it on your own for as much as you can and actually get the leverage you need to go get the deal you want, you might find that you find an indie deal where you own your masters, you do a 50-50 licensing deal, and you still get the label to invest in you based off of that, right?
mm,
Because it's good enough for their brand or their ROI to do that with you and to invest in you. Or if you don't have the leverage, but you're just good and people want to take a swing on you, you might sign a shitty deal for
mm,
5 years.
mm,
Not even saying every 5 year deal is not a good deal, but I'm just saying like you're basically stuck somewhere. And that's how,
mm,
for on a deal that's not favorable terms and is on their terms, right? So
mm.
but you have to, again, it comes down to leverage. If you don't, and if you do have the leverage and you decide to do that in 2026, like maybe a little questionable,
Mm.
but it also depends on what you need, right? Like if you're an artist and you're struggling and you can't put food in your mouth, what are you going to do? Because if you can't feed yourself and you have a manager who's not made a dime off of you, that manager is going to leave you, that lawyer is going to stop working on you, or you're not going to be able to feed yourself or your family. And so maybe you should take the advance, right? Maybe you should take a deal that's less fair because you have no shot of making it otherwise, right? So
Wow.
everything is really circumstantial, and
Yeah.
um, I think it's intentionally confusing because, like I said, this business was found by gangsters and lawyers, and but again, like if you have the leverage, if you can build the leverage, if you have a smart team, if you're smart, I think that's the way to go.
Mm,
That's the only path toward um I wouldn't say I think equity within your own business, equity because it's important to recognize that I just gave two examples of label deals, and that doesn't encompass the music business. The music business is like most. most income is indirect. It's not based off of royalties. Most income is going on the road, going on tour, selling merch, doing VIP meet and greet stuff, doing, getting syncs and license. Like there's all these different avenues of revenue um, to be a business as an artist and as a team. And it's not just about doing a deal. So, but again, even in those deals I just mentioned or those avenues, you still need the leverage, right?
Mm,
Everything is about leverage. That's your best pathway toward any type of equity that I see.
mm. Man, I really, yeah, thank you so much for that breakdown. And I think especially like naming Nipsey is really dope to me because, I think I immediately could think of like, 3 to 5 different, things that he did, before he was, taken from us, that were, that felt like these tipping points or that were revolutionary. Um, God, help me remember, but I remember there was like, didn't he like sold like he had a very, very limited like run of like his album, like the actual physical copies of it. And didn't like Jay-Z like spend like $10,000 on one or something like that?
I
But
don't I don't remember the amount. It was something like that. It was like $1,000 or 10,000. I forget what it was, and he did like
yeah,
100 copies or something like that. Again, he had the leverage to do so,
exactly.
and you gotta have the leverage to do that.
Mm,
And he did, and he did it, and you have to have the balls to do that, and he did, and it worked. And as a marketing exercise, he built scarcity in his marketplace. And I think that's
mm,
another
mm.
piece that is really, really key is your scarcity is everything, right? And when I say scarcity, don't confuse that with being mysterious and not doing shit. Like that's not what I'm
Mm,
talking about. Some people think,
yeah,
why, I don't want to put out too much. It's like it's a very delicate thing to have scarcity and build scarcity. And I learned that through a lot of different releases, different things in my career, people I've worked with who taught me. But that is a really valuable thing that I think Nip built, and that
yeah.
some artists are really good at building.
Mm, mm, mm.
You know,
Um, in the book, right, Gladwell discusses, where he has this thing he calls the broken windows theory, and he essentially discusses how small signs of kind of societal disorder can lead to larger social problems, is what he argues. And I'm wondering, if at all, does this theory apply to issues like representation, pay equity, structural bias in the music industry? Um, and I think especially I'm wondering that because of how fast, things feel like they're changing in the industry. And even just you talking about the different instances of like artists, coming out in a particular era and then just like a few years later, like things completely changing up. Um, yeah, do you feel like small are there small changes that could have like a big impact on where things are going very soon?
yes. Next question. No, I'm just kidding. Um, yeah, I mean, I think the broken windows theory that Gladwell speaks about is kind of about small problems becoming normalized, right? And that's been a big part of the business for a while because again, the way this business was founded, and there are aspects that are incredibly unfair. I will say this, like in my experience, like growing up, as you know, as an artist, and then I like to think of myself as one of the most artist friendly
Mm,
creative type managers you can find, or
mm, mm.
executive types. If there's a handful of us in the business that weren't given a silver spoon or didn't have a family member who,
Sure.
gave us a job in this business, who came into the business as artists, as creatives, and always want to push, there's a few people that you and I know who are doing it at the highest level that, are incredible. But like, I will say that with my experience in the business, I've also seen that these small problems that I used to think like, oh, the label's taking advantage of the artists and the manager is doing it. And it's like, and then you kind of look under the hood and you see, well, actually, there's a reason why a label will give you a bunch of money. And
Mm,
there's a reason why if you don't have the leverage, your royalty rate is this percentage until you recoup, right? And there are, aspects of those deals that could be changed that became normalized, but like some of the stuff is more fair than you would think it is.
huh.
And then there are other aspects that are incredibly unfair and predatory.
Yeah.
that became normalized. And I think the biggest one going forward, to answer your question, is obviously AI. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I was
I've
hoping you would talk about that.
I mean, how can you not, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, Allen Iverson, no, I'm just kidding. Um, sorry.
No, I'm getting all
LeBron went to the Sixers, brother. I don't know.
we can talk about that for an hour.
No, I mean, I think it's the biggest one is right in our face right now. I'm dealing with it in real time and the deals that I'm doing. I mean, a deal just came across my desk that is we worked tirelessly to figure out the best way we possibly could to protect our client from AI. And I
Mm,
won't get into the details, but I'll say that if this client didn't have good management or a great attorney, this is the type of thing that people would just go, yeah, 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 and just like let it fly,
huh.
and an artist would not be aware of. And that stuff is really tricky. And it's it's tough because AI is happening. Like there's
Yeah.
some level of acceptance of this is our normal and this is our reality. And the way I'm seeing there are guardrails. There's definitely salespeople, people in the
Mhm.
business, like artists who are speaking out against it, which I see a lot more,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
There's a visceral response from fans that's very interesting that I've seen. There's like a whiplash effect happening with AI,
Okay.
right? So the cultural side of it is detesting it,
Yeah.
Like I don't know if you saw what happened with Alchemist and Erica Badu recently.
Oh no.
Not too recently, but they released this song. They got a project coming out, and they put out a single artwork that was, I don't think fans know this, but I know this. It was hand driven, the handwritten, like the hand drawn,
Okay.
hand drawn. Like the single artwork was actually drawn by hand. It was art,
Mm,
but they used AI to animate it and created a visualizer with AI.
mm,
And boy, those Alchemist and Erica Badu fans lost their fucking mind,
mm,
you
mm.
know. And these are two fan bases in hip hop and R&B that are the purest of the pure audiences. And it's
Sure.
interesting to see when I say lost their mind, it's just there's
Mm.
just still a conversation going on Twitter to this day. Like I
Wow.
see, and I saw Action Bronson purposely put out an AI album cover because he knew it was going to start. This is my theory. He knew it was going to start a conversation because his
Interesting.
and it did. And he put out an AI, and then he
Yep.
put out his real cover and all that stuff. So I think it's like this. Fans are having this visceral response to it. Um, Streaming services are. It's interesting. Like I'm seeing a little bit of there's some things that streaming like Spotify is now taking measures to let you know if an artist is AI or not,
Wow.
which is, I
Yeah.
think, honestly, I respect, I think is incredibly helpful for everything Spotify does wrong. I think that's a good thing. I saw something recently that Deezer, which like, who cares? Nobody listens to Deezer, but like some people do. Some people listen to Deezer. And Deezer found that some ridiculous percentage, 80+% of AI songs were also fraudulent, meaning that
Mm.
people were using bot farms to stream AI songs. So
Wow.
it's like a Ponzi scheme. It's like I'm gonna
Wow.
create an AI song and then I'm gonna pay bots to stream it and I'm gonna take royalties and revenue,
Oh
right?
my God.
And so like, well, you can't let that happen, right? Like, because that's a business thing, and like because anyone could do that and just make money hand over fist, right? So I
Mm.
think the intention is not so much from the business side of these streaming companies to like protect the art. It's more about business from them. Whereas you
Okay.
see artists talking about it from a place of like, I don't know, Jill Scott just got dragged on social media because she and bless her heart, like she saw some AI artists and was like, this is amazing. And then somebody was like, this is AI. And she's like, it's still amazing. And everyone's like, Auntie, like that's AI, And
Uh,
so it's like it's happening more
that's
and more
funny.
like that. But I think on the business side, it's a really scary thing because
Mm.
you can be an artist putting out music and they can just steal your shit and do
Yeah.
whatever they want with it with no regulations. And so, really trying to figure out these normalized things before they become normalized, which it's man, I can't even begin to tell you how tricky it is, you know?
Whew, that is, I mean, I remember recently seeing SZA, really speaking out against it, and I
Hmm.
think like identifying different ways that, it's like she, her stuff was being like, yeah, essentially copied and reproduced, and stolen essentially, right? And it
Hmm.
was just the other day, Em and I were driving somewhere, but she had put on this I think uh like I think it was like this like Afrobeat station, but we
Hmm.
realized that it was like, I was like, is that Tim's? And it wasn't until we realized that it was AI, because it was like the lyrics were super just generic, right? And it was like sounded good to the ear, but it was like it
Hmm.
just, and we realized when I was like looking further into it that it was like not like it didn't identify an artist, right? And also it was like the same kind of cadence as far as the background music and just how generic the lyrics were. And
Yeah.
so we turned it off, but it was a trip to like, that it sounded like an actual human being, like how just like how yeah, how you can get yeah, sucked into believing that the things are real.
I think it's incredibly important that SZA speaks out about that.
Hmm.
I think it's incredibly important that artists like that continue to speak out about it. And I love Jill Scott, but yeah, like educate her. It's not, like, but we talk about call her in. You don't need to call her out. You call her
Hmm.
in, give her some love and let her know. That's not necessarily how fandom works usually,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But man, I think it's incredibly important for people to continue to do that. Um, I'm terrified of AI.
Mm. Same.
I wish it would go away. I wish it never existed. I also use chat for a lot of things.
Mm.
I use it like a tool. I have a rule. I don't use AI for anything creative. I just draw the line there. I just
Mm.
don't, you know.
Yeah.
And I think it again, like all things in moderation, like it's not fundamentally a bad thing. It's just it's the system in the world that we live in that's going
Hmm.
to milk this until the cows come home. No pun intended.
Mm. Mm.
It's like that's what it is. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
so they're going to exploit it. They're going to try and make as much money as they can off of it, and you kind of have to figure out your place in it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, what's coming to mind too, as you say these things, right, is like the ways that AI will boil down, actual human cultural expression. And here I'm thinking specifically like Black cultural expression,
Hmm.
because, like this, for example, right, that like super generic, fake AI Tim's mix, right, that was like happening. Is actually, yeah, it's like it's not a real thing. It's actually, it's like taking these things and making this kind of amalgamation that's actually literally kind of creating some sort of like essentialist stereotype of like what, Afro like beats like is.
Yeah.
And so, I'm thinking like um, with the tipping points, the role of advocacy, right? So many movements, whether for genre diversity, pay fair for artists, greater representation, they can struggle to reach critical mass, right? And so like what's coming to mind as I say that is like, one of our close friends, right, the Corey Dahi Nachi, right? His album Black Boy Alternative, right? Very, very specifically trying to, be genreless or like blending different things, right? I was thinking about, you spoke on Tyler, right? Like, I think it was like Tyler and then also like Vince Staples' new album, like, describing those projects as like alternative, but like, Black artists often being pushed into, or like, you are hip hop and R&B, and like that's solely like all you can kind of do, even if like a project is completely outside of like the scope of what that generally is. Um, and so I'm wondering, like, from both, kind of this A&R and also social justice perspective, what do you kind of feel like is missing to tip the scales towards real industry transformation? Or do you believe real transformation is possible in the industry for maybe in this like specific, question, thinking about like Black cultural expression having as much kind of autonomy, and freedom as possible?
Mm, First of all, shout out Dahi. That album's great.
Hey, can't wait.
Um,
August 28th.
yeah, man. Pre-save that shit. Trip the algorithm. Help our boy out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, nah, man. Man, the idea of transformation, I don't want to sound doom and gloom.
It's okay.
Um, but I struggle with what that looks like. I think it's when you're in the middle of the eye of the storm, right? Which I've said we are, and I think the most important thing is perseverance and keeping your eyes open and your head above water when you're
Mm,
looking at what's next and what transformation looks like. Man, it kind of reminds me of like there is this the way I feel about this kind of reminds me of when J. Cole went on I think it was like Angie Martinez a while, like this was years ago.
Mm.
And he was like, "Yo, I don't really rock with capitalism."
Yeah, I
And
remember
and
this
and
clip.
and everybody was like, and because you know how it is. It's like we've all been brainwashed to think that, well, you must be a communist, and also communism ideologically is a bad thing, and all these things,
And I
right?
don't
And
even know
so,
what it is,
and I don't even
but
know
it's
what it is.
bad.
Yeah. And so, but Cole is something I just like really respect about the way he handled the conversation was because, immediately. So what, so I think, yeah, I'm paraphrasing. I can't remember if she really said this, but I think Angie Martinez's sentiment was like, "So are you a communist? You're a socialist? Like, what is it? What's the answer? What's the answer?" And it's like, and he was like, "Listen, man, I don't have the answer. I
Yeah.
just, I just think this is fucked up." Like that was literally all he was just like, "Yeah, I just don't really think capitalism is good for humans. Like, I don't think this is working for us." And I don't, again, I think it's through years of generational brainwashing that we can't just be critical and ask the question sometimes. And so I think that's how I feel about transformation in the music business, where it's like I don't know what it takes because I can
Mm.
tell you a multitude of things that I think need to change in the business.
Mm.
Where that starts is going to sound corny, but it starts with one. It starts with you. It starts
Mm.
again, like you're talking about scissor speaking out against AI. Like
Mm.
I think that matters. I think more and more people. I think fans should continue to have visceral responses because, and I think it's working because I think on some level this idea of the tipping point, like sure, like TikTok ain't going nowhere, but at some point it will, right? At some point
Mm.
there'll be another thing, right? If you look at all the cycles, damn near it, it's almost like a 7 year cycle,
Mm. Mm.
right? Like if you look at it from the blog era to the stream era to the digital era, like
Yeah.
I think I just put that together, but I think it literally is like a 7 year cycle, and
Mm.
then it's the next thing. And so unfortunately these things seem to get worse and worse. But
Damn.
but what I will say about this era is that things have become more democratized by necessity
Huh.
as an
Interesting.
artist. So I think you can complain about something like TikTok, or you can figure it out, right?
Okay.
And in many ways, if you're paying attention to what I just said about the backlash that TikTok and especially AI,
Yeah.
because TikTok is actually it used to have back like now it's just fun. I actually think TikTok is amazing, but
Mm.
it's screwed up the way in which our attention spans work and how we consume music for
Oh
sure,
my goodness. Yeah.
which is a whole nother conversation. So when I say things are getting worse, that's what I mean in the way
I
that we
see.
can like consume music.
Woo.
But but if you're paying attention to the backlash, right? Like for instance, what you brought up Dahi and his rollout, and I know who he's working with on it, and I see what he's doing, and he's leaning into authenticity. He's leaning into all the things about him that
Yeah.
are real and true, and he's not worrying about anything else. He's
Yeah.
just worrying about that, right? He's leaning into creativity. He's leaning into his community, the people that he works with, who are in some cases, very big artists, and in some cases, lesser known artists,
Hmm.
and that's authentic to him. And whatever happens with that album is going to happen with that album, and it's going
Yeah.
to be a success for him.
Yeah.
I mean, you
Yeah.
can't get any more successful than he is at this point in terms of being a producer.
Mm.
I think launching his chapter as a new artist. Granted, you can't all be DJ Dye. He has a lot of levers to pull.
Mm.
Like he has a freaking Kendrick feature on there. Like
Sure.
but I think you have to lean into authenticity, and I think that's where the industry is actually going.
Uh-huh.
It's there used to be this thing where the idea of mainstream. Think about the word mainstream, and like there's the
Yeah.
connotation around water, and like it's like fish in an ocean, and that's
Yeah.
the mainstream. And it's like you used to be able to push a button and go right into the mainstream if you looked cool and you had connections, or you had the record, and you
Mm.
had radio, you had a label, whatever it is. And then it turned into the blog era, and then you had to pull this lever and that era, and then it turned into the streaming era, and you
Huh.
needed curators to do it. Now you need a river to get to the ocean. Now it's
Yeah.
about niche, right? and
Mm. Interesting.
and I think the modern superstar is even looking differently. Like I think it's changing. Like you have people like Lola Young out of the UK, right? People who don't actually look like you would say would be superstars, but are young and promising and interesting and
Mm.
unique. And
Mm.
so I think it's the river to the ocean now. I think it's more about establishing your audience and super serving them,
Mm.
And whether that takes you to mainstream, whether that's your goal or not, that's not everybody's goal. But if that's your goal, I think it's more promising than taking a big swing or trying to like sign to a label and make a radio record and make a hit or force it on TikTok or force something you're not, if that
Mm.
makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and you're speaking to all of this, right? But it's like my last question is essentially like, given everything we've discussed, what do you feel like is the next big tipping point that you see coming in the industry and or otherwise, like, because you started to speak like, is it fan-driven platforms, new business model, something else entirely?
Yeah,
Any
I mean,
thoughts on that?
in the spirit of Cole, I don't really know.
Yeah.
I don't. I think I know what I don't like about what's happening now, but I think it is what I'm saying. I think right
Mm.
now, I don't know that I would call that a tipping point. I think the
Okay.
tipping point is like it's still TikTok,
Yeah.
and all these kind of on platform things, but like I don't think anybody can predict the future. I just know that like worrying about what you can control, and
Uh-huh.
again, because things have become democratized, leaning into more of who you are, which funny enough sounds crazy, but some artists struggle with.
Mm.
It's like not an easy thing because it's
Yeah.
not there's no corner to hide in on the internet now. Like
Sure.
you can see everything. Everybody's on live, everybody's on multiple platforms, everything is recorded.
Whew.
Everything is so the bigger you get, there's nothing you can do in public without people seeing it. Now
Yeah.
there's AI, so somebody can post a fake video of you, and then you have to get on and talk about how it's
Oh God.
fake, right? So I think like the more authentic you are, or the more you can prove that your shit is not AI, is like that's the new thing to me. Like that's
Wow.
like, and if you can do that at a level that's scalable, um, and I will say this, like I will, there's an organizing principle that I share with artists that I work with.
Uh-huh.
And some people fundamentally get it, and some people don't. But I learned this when I was working at the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights when we were doing GOTV stuff with the Soul City campaign. And I was doing kind of like door knocking,
Mhm.
and the
Mhm.
principle of the rule of fives in organizing, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which is something I apply heavily to the artists I work with and the base building that I do, because it's essentially the same thing. I run campaigns and I build base. Like that's the
Mhm.
same philosophical thing, right? But the rule of fives, focusing on, your ones, twos, threes, fours, and fives, your ones are your day ones. Your ones are the people that no matter what, you can do no wrong. You put out the worst album of your career, they're still here.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get a weird haircut, you look crazy, they're still here, right? And they're just like, I stand by my man or woman, whatever it is, right? They'll come to every
Yeah.
show, whatever it is. Your twos are, you see where I'm going with this. Your twos
Yeah.
are, they're showing up, they're buying your shit. They may have checked out the last album. They may be peripherally looking, but they're still here. They might come to your show still. Your threes are the people who never really were all the way in, who maybe are casuals, who are familiar, but they've never come to a show. They've never
Okay.
really streamed the music. They say they fuck with you because it's cool for their identity to say that they do or whatever.
Uh,
And then your fours are people who almost pay no attention, who are probably that don't even like your music, and your fives hate your music, right?
wow. Okay.
And like that's it's the same philosophy in organizing, right? When you're trying to figure out your allies and how you're trying to win a campaign, But with music, and this is the toughest thing with artists and building that river to the ocean that I talk about to create the tipping point, which I believe that tipping point is in the ocean. I believe, like I said, if TikTok is still the tipping point, which it technically still is, all the legwork you have to do to get to that point for it to tip, because it doesn't just tip. Like the anomaly is people who just come out of the blue with a record.
Hmm.
Like people thought that happened with Doja Cat. Now that was pre-TikTok, but people thought Moo was like something like Doja been putting out music since like 2011, man. She was on
Yeah.
SoundCloud, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
Sabrina Carpenter, even Tommy Richmond, like out the blue, people like that, they've been putting out music for years, right?
Hmm.
So I think with artists, the hardest part to understand about the rule of fives is that it's really about the threes.
Okay.
It's definitely not about the fours. I mean, you can turn some fours into some threes.
Yeah.
It's certainly not about the fives,
Yeah.
right? But if you can galvanize the twos and the threes, if you can
Yeah.
expand your base and your audience little by little, incrementally, you can start going down a path on a river to an ocean, right? Like you can start to
Mm.
actually build something you start to build real community and real buy-in from people and your fans,
Yeah.
um, it's those threes turn into twos, and some
Mm.
twos turn into ones, and all of a sudden you've got a real audience there, and that's a longer road to travel, I think, and
Yeah.
it requires so much more like direct to fan connection, which I think
Mhm.
is awesome.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of the work that it takes, but it's like rewiring your brain as an artist, and that's why I think so many artists are struggling with like this hasn't always been the and hasn't really been the way up until more recently. So it's kind of returning to what it was. It's like selling CDs out the trunk, low
Yeah.
key.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and that's what I mean by it's becoming more democratized. So I don't know that I can tell you what the next like tipping point thing is, but I think that is the way to get to the current tipping point. And I think where AI is going, I'm seeing such a backlash that if you're a great art, it's a great time to be a great artist.
Mm.
You're an authentic artist right now if you know what you're doing. That's
Yeah.
what I'll say. Yeah.
Mm. What a beautiful breakdown. I love that, man. And like, I like just the way that you bring those organizing principles into, how you support artists and help them kind of think about these tipping points and critical mass and these super important things.
It's
But
tough too, man. It's
yeah,
tough. Sorry to cut you off. The
nah,
toughest thing about explaining that principle to artists is that, and my therapist taught me this because, like every person who's in therapist, I talk about my entire life, especially my career in therapy. And your my therapist taught me that artists fundamentally, and this makes all the sense in the world, fundamentally worry about only their ones, right?
mm,
Often, right? They're
mm,
they're more because it's like it's a survival mechanism, right? For if you're an artist and you have a fan base of 10 people, 100 people, or 2 million people, those are your day ones, and you feel it's like that's like your security net, your
sure,
security blanket. So that's why a lot of times artists are too afraid to do something a little bit different to like
mm,
alienate their ones or to like expand their audience. Or they go, well, like my audience isn't gonna like this, but it's art that you believed in and created and you're afraid to put it
yeah,
out, and they don't understand that like your ones are probably still going to be there. And if you lose a few of them, you're going to gain some twos and some threes. So
mm,
I think it's a really tough principle. It's a really like you can logically understand
yeah.
what I'm saying, but to apply it to your life day in and day out as an artist is a challenging thing for the reason I just mentioned.
Mm, absolutely. God, man, thank you so much uh for your time, for your energy, just sharing, all of these beautiful thoughts on this text. Boom. And so as we
Oh yeah,
when we
man, this is fun.
yeah, absolutely, man. I love spending time. And this is a closing kind of thing that I do with every single guest that I've had so far. And this is really
Are we gonna freestyle? Are we gonna rap battle
you
each
feel
other?
me? You want me to beatbox? I got you. But I essentially ask these same things, to every single guest, and this is really apropos because the first part is what song, musical artist, and/or album would you pair with this book and why?
I mean, the easy answer would just be the roots to tipping point, but I'm not going to say that.
Ah, that
Can
would
I?
be. I
I'll
didn't. I don't
do.
even know why didn't think about that. That's fine.
um, not my favorite Roots album, but had some great records on it.
For sure.
Had some really
I
great
remember that
records.
Scott Storch joint.
Yeah. Um, I think so. I'll go song, and I'll do Raven Lenae Sticky.
Okay. Yeah.
Because number one, it's a big part of what we talked about. One of Malcolm's principles in the books is, a message being sticky. Number two, I think it serves the purpose of for the conversation because it's Raven created a record so sticky, her and Steve Lacy, that it it actually hit at that time the thing that made that I wouldn't say that became a huge hit, but I think its mini tipping point was the show Insecure when Issa Rae put it in the opening credits,
Mm,
and um, that was a really key moment for Raven. Raven, who again, an artist who's been putting out music for a while, took a break, came back, rebranded, was always true and authentic. She put out
mhm,
Hypnos, which was incredibly slept on, underrated album, and had all these bodies of work, and she's just who she is authentically. And then she got with our friend Dahi and created Love Me
Hmm.
Not, which is a fucking smash. Like
Yeah,
that's a record, you know? And so
absolutely.
it's sticky as hell. And I think um she's accomplished it. And again, like you might think she came up out of nowhere and it was overnight. It absolutely was not. You know, she dropped two different cultural bodies of work, had cultural moments that were sticky, and then had her big moment, and her tipping point came. So I'm going to
Mm,
go with Raven Lenae Sticky.
who is also featured on Dahi's new album coming out.
Of course she is.
Uh, yeah, so and then this is the very last piece. And so I'll just ask if you could please complete the following sentence. People should read The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell because dot dot dot.
Um, because it's important, you know, it's important. It's an important piece, I think. Again, it's not just the business that I'm in. It's important to contextualize the times that we're in. I'm pretty sure you can apply you know, all types of aspects of this book to your life, almost whatever you do. So I think it's an important piece. It's evergreen. It's yeah, it's just important work. And it's one of those game changers, man. It'll change the way you think.
Mm, mm. Beautifully said. Well, Blooms, I am honored to be one of your number ones, one of your biggest fans. I love you,
Likewise.
brother. Yeah, thank you for the gift of your time today. And to the folks out there listening, thank you so much for joining us today. Hoping that this next week ahead is good to y'all. And we hope you enjoyed the flight. Peace.
Peace, peace.